All righty, it's that time. Happy Wednesday afternoon to those of you joining us, probably in the Eastern and Central time zones. So thank you for joining us. Those from other far-reaching places on the planet, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good morning to you. And those of you joining us on our YouTube channel, thanks for joining as well. Happy to see you all. Happy to be back here. Happy 2021 from Aaron and I. Thank you for joining. We will, again, I'm Steve Bartos. I have the honor and privilege of co-leading the Columbus Tableau user group. And I head up the corporate advanced analytics team at Worthington Industries for my day job. And I'm not doing fun things like Columbus Tableau user grouping. We will say, I'll just a quick note from Aaron and I, we realized it has been a while since we have seen you all. I think it's early December, and we've realized that, and it hasn't been for lack of concern. It has been a bit due to lack of some time. I think we've both been pretty well underwater from both our day jobs and some of life's various curveballs. So, again, great to be back. We do have a credible plan. Aaron and I, right before this, got off a call with Adam Slipsky and Mark Benioff, and they did approve. We do have a credible plan. We're back on track. We're not quite fully in the green. Maybe we're a yellow from a red, but we are back on track. And we do have an excellent group of speakers today, excellent program as usual. And with that, I'll turn it over to Aaron. Aaron, over to you.
Cool. Thanks, Steve. Like Steve said, there has been some time between our last meeting and this meeting. We hope to have these on a more regular cadence like we've had in the past. We just had holidays, New Year, and a bunch of life events happen between the last user group and this one. So I'm Erin Ham. I am a senior cybersecurity engineer at Comcast, stationed here in Columbus, and Comcast is out of Philadelphia. So with that, I've been helping with the Columbus Tableau user group with Steve for about the past year now. I think it's almost a year. I hope it feels like a year. With that, we'll go through the agenda for February 2021. So we are going to kick off our new segment that we kicked off last year. It's learning from our peers. So this is the new segment. Again, we're hosting this every month, and this is a chance for all of our audience members to share in an open forum and with other members of the community your tips, tricks, best practices, personal stories surrounding analytics, something great that you accomplished within the last time we met between now and then, skill, anything exciting you have experienced with Tableau, a new feature that you're excited about coming out or being released. So if you are interested in speaking, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll go ahead and allow you to unmute yourself, and then you'll have the floor for anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes, or as short as long as that would take you between that time. The next up, we have Embedded Analytics with Derrick Austin. And so this is about talking about, have you ever built the perfect dashboard in Tableau, only to publish it to Tableau Server, and then wait for the traffic that never comes. So even if your dashboard has all the knobs and whistles that management could ever ask for, if it's hard to find, it doesn't do anyone any good. So the solution is embedded analytics. So Derrick Austin from Interworks will show us the approaches to integrating your dashboards into everyday flows and how to really drive traffic to your visualizations. Following that, we'll have the path to brilliance, building an analytical center of excellence at Signet Jewelers. And so we have Gary and Ian. And so this session will review our in-progress corporate strategic turnaround called the Path to Brilliance, and it's 3 planks: customer first, omni-channel, and the culture of agility and efficiency. It's about changing the hearts and minds of the user community and gaining executive buy-in. You'll learn how they have encountered and overcome process challenges, how we're building a true community of passionate analysts, and how we've gone from a handful of Alteryx and Tableau licenses a few years ago to a proof of concept to enterprise deployment since then. And then with that, we'll do the closing remarks at 3:50, and then kick it off for our next meeting in hopefully end of March, beginning of April timeframe. So with that, we'll kick it off to the Learning from Our Peers segment. Anyone want to be the brave soul to speak up first? Go ahead and raise your hand.
Big moment. We can give you imaginary swag since we're not in person. So you can close your eyes and then I'll say something cool and you can just pretend it's been.
There is an exciting thing that we do plan to give away.
That's right.
We were hoping to incentivize those folks. So we'll go ahead and kick that off. We have a free Tableau learning license. Steve, if you want to provide more details of that, but if you want to go ahead and raise your hand, speak up. One of those lucky participants will be selected to win a Tableau learning license.
Is it Deborah? I believe Deborah's hand. I'm gonna. Oh, two hands. Oh, they're coming in fast.
Got it. Okay, so let's go ahead and allow Deborah to talk, and then we'll kick it over to
her. I could barely unmute. I was so nervous with the shaking on the mouse.
All right. So, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. We can.
Okay, so I just wanted to go first because anything that I'm going to say is probably going to be totally overshadowed by everyone else's awesome tips and tricks that they have. So I'm with TriHealth in Cincinnati, and I'm very new to Tableau. I'm on here with my colleague Joanne, so we're learning Tableau. I just wanted to say that I'll have to say, this is what I'm excited about for Tableau. And I'll tell you maybe a little tip that I did regarding dates, but just wanted to say that every day I have to like look up something new. But what's exciting is that once I actually get it under my belt, it's so much easier to do the next step. So it's like everything I'm looking up is so easy, probably for everyone else just to do particular things. So, so my big thing that I was able to do that I was excited to do was I was missing dates for some data I had. So I had to incorporate a date dim table to fill in dates. And so then when I picked on a particular subset of data, that date would display instead of it being disappeared. So that was something I learned that I was excited. It was trying to overcome, but at TriHealth, we're doing new hire turnover data, and it's a lot of calculations. So not so much pretty vizzes and things like that, unfortunately yet, but mostly just learning calcs.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for sharing, Deborah. And I think there's a lot of folks on this call who could probably resonate with that fact of they started to learn more. And then as they learned more, then they started getting into those really advanced visualizations. So keep on at it and those visualizations will come.
Yep.
And just so there's a part of that that's, I just sent a note in the chat, and I don't know how we're not using your cool technology that you usually bring to the table, Aaron. We forgot, but the idea is this something folks want to learn more about is, and it sounded like a part of it was dates, but then part of it was that I can't remember the name. There's an official name for it. And I was just frantically looking it up. But how do you pad your data and find ways to address some of these data challenges with something similar to what you just referenced?
Exactly. And that's exactly what it was. It's creating date ladders, I think is what they call it. And so luckily I have, so a little bit more complicated, unfortunately, than just being able to take an Excel spreadsheet and making it pretty, but.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Well, you're welcome. So I'm looking forward to some really good tips now.
And again, that's perfect. I mean, there's a lot of different dimensions to this, particularly, and it's something that we haven't, we introduced at last meeting, but I think that's perfect that it may not be just like someone's like, oh, that's a tip I can immediately go and deploy in my work, but it surfaces a topic, and then if folks in the community are interested, it'd be like, hey, let's talk about that and how that can be used. So that's excellent. Thank you very much. And thanks for not being scared, because I'm almost certain, I can't say I guarantee it, but if someone out there is thinking it and wants to chat about it, there's probably someone else out there, maybe not everybody, but someone that's going to say yes.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for being here, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. So next up we have Carter. And so Carter, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Cardam Gary. I work over at Cardinal Health on their med side. I'm super excited because I finally got it to work. I'm using a Python package for Tableau Server client. And if you publish your Tableau workbook to your server and use this Python package, you can have the Python package spit out, filter through your dashboard as you wish, and spit out a bunch of images, just as if you had, export to PowerPoint or copy dashboard and paste somewhere else. It will spit out all of the images. And so what I did was I rebuilt a deck, PowerPoint deck that I had been doing manually for months. I put it in Tableau, made sure all the dashboard's gonna look the same as the PowerPoint. And then the Python package filtered through all the different sales teams for me and output 110 PowerPoint slides in like 20 minutes. So super excited about the Python ability to filter through things and grab those images for me.
Fantastic. And how much,
Steve,
like,
we can't hear you. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was trying to, I was like, I'm overwhelmed. I'm like,
yeah.
I'm getting in my own head and realizing it's not a good thing to do, like not communicating verbally while you're off mute and everyone's staring at you. In your level of experience with like Python as a tool or techniques like this?
This is the first project I've done with Python, put it that way.
Really?
Yeah, so I've got a little experience with R. So, having experience with other coding languages helps. But this was really like, Google this, Google that. How do you install Python? How do you learn this one package, maybe another package to help with getting the images into PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm.
But a teammate of mine and I kind of took that on as a challenge, and everything we know about Python we learned in the last 6 months. So it's definitely doable.
We do have a question for you. What package did you use? And it seems like there are people who would love to learn more about how you did that. And if you would potentially be able to share more insights at another meeting. So that is something we can connect on. But what package did you use?
It's called Tableau Server Client. And I think if you Google like Python get images from Tableau Server, something comes up pretty quick. Tableau Server Client, Python, and it's got a whole web page workbook of instructions. Python client, GitHub might be one, or API reference there. Yeah, and so there are other people in the Tableau community that have obviously used that. So you'll see some of this, but yeah, if you look for, maybe Google Python package, Tableau Server Client.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
It definitely sounds like a lot of time saved and something that will allow you to get back to the analytics versus copying, pasting.
Yeah. And you said the end result in this was a PowerPoint, correct, Carter?
Yes, 10 PowerPoint decks.
Yeah. And that's similar. We've discussed, there's a use case internally of taking information out of Tableau, and it's, serving up, for Salesforce out on the road, visiting customers, and how do you serve up some custom reports that are often heavily copied and pasted into emails and distributed. And in addition to, there's another version, there's a gentleman we talked to, I can't remember the name of his company. They were doing something similar with this in Python and then serving it up. It was like insights into inbox. So for leadership, delivering it in the inbox. And the idea was they're not going to necessarily, maybe they're at least the assumption on their side was there's a lower probability of these folks getting into and logging into a dashboard, particularly if there's multiple systems and sources. And it was serve this up. And then if you want to click on this insight or click on this portion of the deliverable, it'll take you to whatever system, wherever it exists, to do some deeper dive. So
all that.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Thanks.
Sounds like we may have queuing up a topic here.
So I think with that, Carter and Deborah, thanks for sharing. Steve and I will do a randomization to see which one of you win the free Tableau e-learning key. And then if you could just shoot us an email. My email is just aaron_ham@comcast.com. And Steve, I don't know yours.
I was going to say, I didn't know, between the two of you, Carter and Deborah, are either of you already participating in the Tableau e-learning? We hate to reward you with something that you already have.
No, not already.
Okay. All right. Nope. Okay, so they're both candidates. We'll find out a very overly complicated way of determining.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Right.
So it looks like we have one more person with their hand raised. So Tim, we'll give you the floor for about 2 minutes, and then we'll kick it over to Derrick to talk about embedded analytics.
Take it away, Tim.
All right, can you hear me? We're good?
We can hear you.
Yeah, I just wanted to tie in with the other gentleman just said in regards to, using Python. I know at BMW, what we're going through a lot of SQL training right now, and they're just trying to really implement that and get us up to speed. And SQL is not anything I've ever used before, but with using that SQL management server tool in regards to all of our databases that we have, I'm finding it a lot easier to do all the joins and do all the other stuff within SQL and test it out, and then use that custom SQL feature in Tableau on the data sources and just copy and pasting that in there. And I'm finding that, to be a lot more efficient from our side to use SQL up front and then tie that in directly with Tableau. And that was just something that I've been really enjoying learning and developing. And hopefully after we get through all of this SQL training for the next several months, that we'll tie that in with R or Python. So yeah.
Perfect. And then for anyone who is new to coding or SQL or wants to learn another language, I have found that it's called Code Academy is a great resource. It walks you through lessons. It's free. You can pay for a version. I've always used the free version, but it will give you a lesson plan, the code to type. If you can't figure it out, it provides you the solution after 2 attempts that you've missed. And then it also gives you a recap of each of those lessons. Super helpful. I've learned, I think, 3 languages just by using that website. Awesome. So thank you, Tim, for sharing.
Hello, Alexander. I just wanted to share what I'm working on right now. I'm just implementing a, kind of like a website, but through GitHub Pages to where you don't have to pay for the hosting. I put some links in the chat for the Jekyll to, publish a GitHub page. And you use the Java API samples to basically embed them. So just want to share that.
Yeah, thank you.
And I will go ahead and share those out to the community. It looks like you shared them with just the panelists. So I will share those out to the rest of the community. So these 2 links that are coming at you guys now are from Alex, and they are from his GitHub repository. So with that, let's go ahead and kick it off to Derrick Austin to talk about embedded analytics.
Thanks, Aaron. All right, let me share my screen real quick and then we'll get going. Okay, so embedded analytics, oddly enough, Alex really teed us up for a conversation here, so thanks, Alex. Embedded analytics is a huge thing to really help with your visualizations in Tableau. But before we get there, I want to tell you a little bit about myself and Interworks. I work for a company called Interworks, and we're basically IT, everything from server infrastructure to networking to Tableau. We're actually Tableau's oldest partner. We've been doing Tableau work for years at this point. I think way back in 2005, 2006, so quite a while. We were Tableau's first partner, and we just worked with it ever since. In fact, if you come to Interworks today and say, hey, I want to do data visualization, we always work with Tableau. We don't work with other platforms because we see that as being the gold standard, if you will. Myself, I joined Interworks with a web background back in 2013, and that was well before embedded analytics was a thing. And so I did a little bit of everything at Interworks. I worked with Tableau desktop stuff, Tableau server installs, data warehousing as well, kind of that SQL side and getting things ready for Tableau. But soon, Tableau came out with the APIs that we now know as the Tableau JavaScript API and the REST API, and embedding became a bigger and bigger thing. And with my web background, I led Interworks to launch our Curator product in 2016, and I'm actually a product manager for that today. Through that, we've built some really cool stuff with embedded analytics, and I can't wait to show it to you. But before we talk about embedded analytics, let's talk a little bit about Tableau. We're all here because we love Tableau. Tableau is a great product. It gets us excited. It builds these amazing visualizations, but there's always a but, right? Tableau has the ability to be an even better platform. So like a couple of these discussions earlier, whether it's the PowerPoint export or the Get web pages, Tableau can really be expanded to be whatever you need it to be. It doesn't have to be what you build in Tableau Desktop. These days, there's Tableau's extensions, there's embedded analytics, there's various APIs to work with Tableau. And so there's so much more that you can do than what's in the box with Tableau Desktop. And that's where embedded analytics comes in. But I want you to think about your Tableau experience. Are you using Tableau more as a product, something that's fairly static and not expandable, or are you using it more like a platform? And the reason why this is really important is because when you think about a product, you're thinking of something static like PowerPoint or Excel, whereas a platform is something that you can build and infinitely expand upon. And Tableau really gives us the capability for that. A product is a silo to itself and really doesn't interact with other systems, but a platform can be a piece of the greater puzzle, and it fits into those existing systems and processes so that we can put Tableau wherever it needs to be in our organization to really put it front and center. So to illustrate this concept a little bit, I want to rewind to the 1990s. This is actually a picture of me pre-braces back in the 1990s, I think third grade or something like that. If you are a 90s kid, you most likely remember these. These are Hot Wheels cars. And these were amazing, right? This was a huge part of my childhood. I collected these cars, I put them on tracks, I sent them all over the room, flying into fiery crashes. It was great. And we really enjoyed these growing up until one day, a new friend came over to our house, and he was dismayed by what he saw. Because this kid, he was a Hot Wheels collector. And so he would actually keep these cars in the box just like this. Now that's cool. You can look at them, but you can't really play with them. You can't interact with them. And he actually talked us into collecting these as well. And so funny story, fast forward several years, I was cleaning out some stuff at my parents' house recently, and I found a bunch of these still in the box. These cars were an investment that we had made, but we never really capitalized on it. We never used the toys as the way that they were supposed to be used. Instead, they kind of went to waste. They were really cool and really fun, and they would have been great for a 7-year-old kid, but instead they collected dust in the attic. How often do your Tableau dashboards collect dust in the attic? So really, that's what the big thing is about using Tableau as a platform. you want to make sure that your users are finding and consuming your dashboards. Because at the end of the day, if you build a dashboard that has every bell and whistle that management could want, every number right there, easy to consume, it's pixel perfect and a beautiful piece of art, if your users can't find it, it's completely worthless. It's collecting dust in an attic somewhere. And so, when you think about embedded analytics, it's really about taking that unfound perfect report and surfacing it. When we think of Tableau Server, often there's a lot of stuff on there. There's some dev dashboards. There's an interface that can be a little cumbersome to use for that new person or the CEO. With a web interface, we can narrow down and make a targeted area to gather data. We can make it simple and easy to use and even integrate with existing company processes and policies and pages. Maybe there's already a SharePoint site or something like that that people consume daily. Whatever that happens to be in your organization, tie Tableau right into that instead of trying to fit your users into Tableau. Really, when you think about embedded, I like to think of a couple of different things that we want to target here. We want to make it comprehensive, something that is complete and accurate and covers everything. Timely data, whether it's Tableau or whether it's that PowerPoint that the other guy was generating, you can combine all of that into one place for your customers, and with embedded, just mesh it together into a one-stop reporting shop. But you also need it to be simple. With embedded analytics, you can really narrow down what is presented to your users. They don't need to have those development dashboards available to them, and the navigation doesn't need to have a site, project, workbook, dashboard flow. They can go straight to their dashboard if that's what they need, or you can have a couple of links in the navigation, but you can really just make it very, very easy for them to find and gather the data that they need. This provides also another really good place for some open communication. Maybe you want to add in some widgets where you can talk back and forth with the people consuming your dashboards right in line. You also want the data to be portable, something that the audience can take, like those PowerPoint exports from earlier. Maybe they need that to be on an offline copy on a plane or whatever it happens to be. But you also need it to be consumable. And last of all, you need your dashboards to be agile. So embedded analytics, really, you can't make it something that's solid and is static and doesn't change, because Tableau isn't that. Tableau is the thing that you can take into your CEO and you can drag and drop things around and instantly have a dashboard that answers his questions. And so embedded analytics is something that you can use to achieve that goal as well. So I want to talk a little bit about, well, what does this look like? Derrick, you've talked about some concepts. What does this look like to me personally? And so with that, I present The Notch. The Notch is a fictional apparel company that we've come up with at Enterworks to help explain this concept. Think of them as being in their ideal data landscape, kind of a small startup company, a retail brand, if you will, that sold to a couple of different retailers, but really wasn't that big. They had some point of sale data, some bookings data, finance, market share. Everything was kind of set up and working for them. But the problem becomes when that data grows. And so instantly we need to figure out a lot more with a lot more data and a much wider range as well. Imagine them going from a single retail outlet to a giant tweet by a major sports figure or something like that, and they add in a bunch of different retailers. And now they have this new challenge of scaling what they've been doing before into something massive. And that's where embedded analytics can really come in. So if you think of this company moving forward, they really need to have kind of a full circle approach to analytics. Embedded analytics to engage everybody, from the factory workers to the CEO. Somebody needs to consume some data about what they're doing. And often it's the person that's sitting next to you, just everybody, A to Z. Of course, there's a lot of different things that could go into this as well. I've worked with so many companies that have duplicate efforts when it comes to data. And so when you look at a company that's growing, that's something that you really want to eliminate. And with embedded analytics, you can kind of make a one source of truth. for us at Enterworks, we have a reporting portal that we go into and we look at all of our dashboards across the company. Does that eliminate all of the duplicate efforts? No, not necessarily, but it does help, because before I build a dashboard to look at sales or finance or whatever, I can go and look and see if it's there. This allows us to really grow without that over engineering aspect as well. Just kind of talking about a couple of other things we might move in here. We could tie into the data foundation, or making sure that the data is available in embedded analytics as well. We really want to make sure that our users have this frictionless access to insights, regardless of where it's coming from. We can put in things like documentation and links to server hosted data sources right here in our embedded environment without having to dive in too deeply. We can even have things like training built in as well. I've seen some companies that have tutorial pop-ups or little videos, or even better, a whole center of excellence based around embedded analytics. Something like this tug, for instance, a lot of people do internal Tableau user groups at their organizations. And with embedded analytics, you can really make that a really central thing to everything you do. Really, this helps us make Tableau that platform and this holistic vision for everybody within the organization. Everybody uses analytics in some fashion, and so we really need to make it effortless and easy to use, regardless of who's looking at it. It shouldn't have to take additional training to get our users to that point. And so with that, I'd love to hop into a live demo, because that's what we're all here for, right? Show me the shiny things. And so I'm going to switch over to web real quick, reshare my screen, and let's take a look at what this could look like. Just a second as it switches here. Okay, and so should be able to see my screen now. This is, oh, there it goes. Okay, this is an embedded environment for the Notch, and this is built around kind of their product, their look and feel, their designs, their marketing team. As you can see, we talked about them being a retail company, and maybe they sell these handbags in the background, or the clothing, or whatever it happens to be. Imagine this being a background image with their product in it. But right here, when we come into this portal layer, this embedded analytics layer, we have some things that really just make it easy for my user to dive into the content that makes sense to me. For instance, I do have this featured dashboard area. Maybe this is something that changes based on my user's role. Obviously, the CEO has different needs than the factory line worker, or the QA guy, or the data analyst. Regardless of what that is, you could promote different dashboards right here on the homepage for those user groups. Also, I've tied into favoriting, and so right here, front and center, our sell-through dashboard. For whatever reason, my user has favorited that, and so it shows up first, right here on the homepage. Underneath that, some recently viewed dashboards. Obviously, if I've seen these, recently I might go back to them again. I have some branding text at the top. This could really be whatever you want, though. I have some clients that it makes a lot of sense for them to have a single dashboard as a landing page that has some really high-level KPIs for the high-level people. And then maybe the analysts, they want to dive into different menu items and go a little bit deeper, but really they want to give their CEO or their boss one URL to get the 4 numbers he needs, and so he can get out of there quickly without losing it. Regardless of what that homepage is, you can really make it your own with embedded analytics, because at the end of the day, it's something that you custom tailor to be yours, not Tableau out of the box. It's whatever your needs are, whatever the Notch's needs are, or whatever company you happen to work for. Diving into a couple of just really fun examples with this, I'm actually going to hop into our executive overview here. This is one of my favorite examples because it takes Tableau dashboards to the next level. Obviously, when you click into these, you're going to see a Tableau dashboard kind of front and center. You can interact with that. We'll take a look at that in just a second. But also you can take that and do so much more with it. In this particular example, I have a couple of high-level KPIs. You could think of this as being a landing page for an executive member, or maybe an analyst, or whoever. And as you look across these are various metrics that are pretty common in the retail world. These could be different metrics, obviously, in your case, but each of these is a little Tableau dashboard. And so we have our sell-through dashboard and our bookings dashboard and our point of sale. But what's really interesting about this is if I want to drill into that number and say, hey, why is our bookings number down 0.5% this season? I can click into that and then instantly go to more of a drill down type dashboard. There I can look at the different segments and just really get the numbers that I need to figure that out. If I scroll up, maybe now I need to look at the point of sale. With embedded analytics, you can tie all of this together in a really interesting way and then dive into that dashboard, which is being a little slow at the moment, of course, but dive into that dashboard and look at it as well. Just right here, all in one page without ever leaving. I'm going to just like a plain dashboard here real quick. You can pull up whatever you want in here and plug in the dashboards from Tableau and really just make them visually appealing to your audience. But you can actually add to that a lot as well. And so in this particular case, I have a bookings dashboard that I've embedded in here. Underneath it, I've actually added in some recommended content. So these might be items that you pick and choose, like hand curated items that are related to this particular dashboard. We have some clients that like to do that. Or it could be something like an Amazon market basket analysis, where I go to Amazon, I search for a pair of gloves, they suggest 15 others, kind of like that with the dashboards here. And just because my users have seen this bookings dashboard, they might also be interested in this point of sale dashboard based on what other users look at. And so there's a lot of options for this because once again, embedded analytics is all about making it your own and surfacing that content to your end users. Of course, we don't ever want to remove functionality from our end users that we deem important either. And so we can actually use embedded analytics with Tableau's JavaScript APIs to still interact with that dashboard just like we could on Tableau Server. Maybe that's the ability to full screen this dashboard or to reset the filters or set up custom views. Whatever that happens to be, it's pretty easy to tie into Tableau's APIs and still give your users that functionality. Maybe it's even downloading images or CSV of this dashboard. But in addition to that, you can really string those APIs together and do some really cool stuff. One of my favorite examples is actually the report builder over here, which captures a snapshot of the dashboard exactly like we're looking at it. Earlier, somebody had mentioned PowerPoint, and this is kind of exactly what my head jumped to. Right here, we have this report builder, and it has a slide with an intro kind of slide here and a final slide. And those are pre-populated for this particular setup. That could really be whatever you want. I can add some images here for different slides, or I can just capture a snapshot of this dashboard exactly like I'm looking at it. This will take whatever parameters, whatever filters, whatever marks I have selected, and add that to the dashboard. And then I have a slide in a PowerPoint deck that I can then export out. Maybe I want to change the filters on this. I'll select men's here and filter it down. And I can actually add a secondary slide with that data. In addition, the way that we have this particular one set up, we could go through the various links on the portal environment, grab different items, different slices of data, and just really build out this deck that we can then email out to our boss or our CEO, or we could even just download it right here as a PowerPoint or a PDF file. Or probably more important for all of us, you can schedule this to show up in your inbox as well. Maybe we want this report to come out. We'll call this a sales report, and we want it to come out to the sales team, so sales at Interworks maybe. And we can put in a message. We can schedule that to come out weekly. Whatever that happens to be, it's very easy to get that going. And it really just ties together a couple of Tableau's APIs to do so. In fact, one of my favorite features on this I forgot about is this little comment bubble here. So as you're building out these slides, maybe I need to explain why the sales are down. And so you can just type that down, hit save, and that will actually be in that export when you're done as well. And you can choose whether it's below or to the right side of that screenshot. Once again, it's really just kind of using embedded analytics to take things to the next level. Another item that's really, really common is actually what we call inline commenting. And so I'm going to pull up our market share dashboard to look at that. Of course, Tableau is very, very static in the data. Like you can refresh the data extracts, of course, but it doesn't really have a way to write back. And that's what we're kind of simulating here. By the way, this is something that a lot of our users use. This is a tutorial pop-up. Back to the training aspects, right? Like this dashboard's maybe a little bit harder to use because of the inline commenting. And so we have some description here, a link out, a little animated GIF. We actually have some of these, I'll pull one up in a second, where you can go between different slides and it'll highlight different portions of your dashboards. So some really cool stuff with that. But basically the way that this works is I have this line chart, and you can see there are a lot of comments on it already. I should clear those out at some point. But as I hover over one of these little icons, you can see a comment that it says, way to go, and it has a checkbox and a status of success. And the X is a warning, and it's just a test comment there. But essentially, I click on a mark, and it pops up a form. And in that form, I can add comments about my data. And so maybe fall 18 was, it doesn't look like it was down. We'll say about the same. And so when I add in that comment, I can say, yeah, that's a great thing, click submit. And then when I submit, it will actually refresh this dashboard and pull in that data just right there in line. And so you can see the comment that I just made is right there in the chart. And so really all that's doing is taking Tableau's APIs, kind of blending some stuff together, sending some data to a database, and then refreshing that dashboard. And so not super complicated to set up, but it really gives your users something a little bit more than the stock Tableau functionality that they might need in their day-to-day jobs. In fact, I have one client in particular that uses this in a really interesting way. They have a crosstab, yeah, crosstab, but in that crosstab, it's essentially a list of to-do items for their field team. And the field team can come in, look at the item, they can click in it and get a drill down to see exactly what needs to happen. But when it's done, they can actually pop up a form, they can mark it done, they can add a comment about what exactly happened, hit submit, and then it disappears from the chart that they have. Really at that point, it's a data point. And so you can do a lot more than a tooltip. That's just kind of the basic functionality there for sure. Another really interesting one when you think about retail is this on-site overview. And this on-site overview is actually one of my favorites to demo because it will actually filter down the chart based on where I'm at. So you can imagine maybe I am, oh, my location's turned off. Well, we'll have to imagine that. But you can imagine I'm in New York City, I'm on my iPad, I'm looking at a Tableau dashboard, and I'm about to walk into a store. Essentially what you can do with this is you can open up the chart and it will narrow down to the store that you're at, the closest one. It basically passes in a latitude and longitude to the chart from Chrome to Tableau Server and then to the workbook. And then the workbook just has some magic in it to figure out which is the closest store to that latitude and longitude. And then from there, obviously we've highlighted a certain store. We can compare it to a different store or one across town, or we could even go out a little bit and look across states, but really just kind of expanding that Tableau functionality and making it a little more useful to the guy who might not be using it in the most traditional way. Switch over to slides here real quick. So basically what I'm saying is building a great dashboard isn't enough in a lot of cases. You really have to frame that experience to be what your users need. We spend days, months, years building out the perfect dashboard, but if at the end of the day, if we let it go to waste, if people aren't finding it, then that's a problem. It doesn't matter how great that dashboard is. We really have to give them experiences that make sense to them. So your boss, your CEO, your clients, they're not Tableau developers. And a lot of times you don't even want them to know that Tableau is under the hood. You just want to look like that magician when you're talking about your clients, especially. But regardless of what it is, you really don't need them to learn the interface. You don't want to expect them to learn the interface because, to be honest, to be brutally honest, a lot of times they won't, especially if you're talking about the CEO who's super busy or the client who just doesn't really care. They just want to look at their reports. And so embedded analytics is all about custom tailoring your Tableau dashboard consumption to your users, not forcing your users to be custom tailored to Tableau. And so really just lowering those barriers of entry so that you can give the best experience right away. And so a great example of this is actually some work that we did at Arby's. And this is not NDA, this is something that's out there. And on our podcast here, I have a link to it. A guy named Carl Redette did this podcast with our team to talk about this particular setup. And so it's a really, really cool story. I highly recommend just going and listening to the podcast in general. But essentially what they did is they made an area that was Arby's. And so if you think about Arby's prior to the remodel, they've actually remodeled their stores. And so this is a little bit different. But if you think about Arby's, they have this like chalkboard type menu structure. They have a very Arby's logo, the little hat with the Arby's in it. Just have a look and feel that feels Arby's. And so even down to the login screen, which I have up right now, they customized everything. So they have this login screen, and then my favorite, once you log in, you're presented with dashboards that look like your meats. You know, Arby's has some meats. So they have the fish, the cow, the chicken. Honestly, when they asked me to build this, I thought they were crazy. But then once we implemented it just went over so well, because internally people could look at this and say, wow, that's our brand. And then those icons, obviously, you can click into a larger dashboard. So it's kind of a fun thing on the landing page there. But when you look at this, it is very, very Arby's. And so to quote Carl, who just found this to be a huge success over there, he said, make it your own. That, I think, has been a huge part of the success of the portal that they stood up. That is, the portal came out and it looked very Arby's. It was clearly Arby's. Even someone outside the organization could look at it and within seconds say, oh yeah, that's an Arby's portal, because we made it consistent with our menu boards and things like that. So for Arby's, that was a huge success factor to Tableau and adoption for them. And so what does that look like for you? Maybe it doesn't look like the retail demo that we looked at. Maybe it doesn't look like Tableau. Whatever that happens to be, I challenge you to explore embedded analytics in a lot of different ways and to really push the boundaries. I've said for years, and I continue to say, that really with embedded analytics, we're just scratching the surface of the possibilities. There's a lot out there that's possible that people haven't thought of or even dreamed of yet. There's just so much that you can do with those APIs to really make things unique and custom for your users. And so I actually have in my slide deck, there's a link to this. This is curator.interworks.com/page/demos. We have a lot of demos because we like to show this in a variety of different aspects. We look through the retail demo. The education is one of my favorite, or restaurant as well. A lot of different demos here just to kind of look at different verticals and how things might apply in a different way. You might not be finance, but maybe there's a feature in that embedded analytics experience that makes sense to you. Think of this as a gallery that you can use to really come up with some cool ideas. A couple of these that I really just want to hop into real quick. Let's do the education demo. And I'll also pull up this showcase one. I think that'll cover everything here. So the education demo, this is a fake university, Acme University. They have this teal color. And you can see it's just very different than the retail setup. They still do have some featured dashboards and some recommended underneath it, but really they've kind of custom tailored this to their look and feel. There's even books on it. Within this, there's some drop downs along the top to kind of navigate the site as well. So I mentioned earlier loading screens, and this is where that really comes into play. The tutorial here is one of my favorites because not only does it have some text telling the user about this particular dashboard, it's actually highlighting a section of the dashboard. And as I click through these, it will highlight a different section and a different section. And then finally, it has one that just kind of does a little animated GIF as well. But really, you can highlight those different sections and make it your own. Make it something that makes sense to you. And really with that tutorial, you can really tell users a lot about your dashboards and how to use it. Just pulling it up real quick, we'll go back to that first slide. It tells you even how to use that filter and what that filter will affect and different things there. This is something that you could set up and show your users the first time they view the dashboard, or maybe the first 5 times, or maybe it's a continual thing that keeps popping up over and over again until they say, hey, don't show me this anymore. Or maybe it's just something where they click a little icon and it shows up. Really, at the end of the day, it's up to you. With embedded analytics, you can really custom tailor that. Another thing on this page while we're here is the filters area. These are filters just like they would be in Tableau. I think they're both filters at least. They could be parameters as well. Tableau's JavaScript API allows you to take the filters from here inside the Tableau dashboard and move them out into the portal experience, embedded analytics experience. And you might say, well, why would I do that? If you compare kind of the look and feel, that might be one reason. Just because it gives it a different look and feel, you can custom tailor it to look and feel like your stuff. But really, I think that there's some really interesting things that you can do with these as well. In this particular setup, you might notice I'm already filtered to District 4. And that's actually because the last time I came to this page on this site, on this dashboard, that's what I set this filter to. And the platform has actually remembered that. It's stored on my user session, hey, Derrick selected District 4, and that automatically gets reapplied. In fact, if I went to a different dashboard that had district on it, it would also be filtered to District 4. This is a concept that we call sticky filters or global filters. Basically, it's a filter that you set once and you forget it. Kind of like a user preference for how they want their data filtered. This is an education site, and so district might be pretty big. In fact, imagine I'm the district lead for District 4. I probably don't want to go to each dashboard and then refilter it once I get there. That takes a lot of time, especially if your dashboards are slow, but also it's a lot of clicks that I shouldn't have to do. In this case, it's one filter, but imagine that was 15 filters. Then it becomes a huge problem very quickly. Whereas if I could save those and reapply them automatically, then that'll save everybody a bunch of time. Another really interesting thing you can do with moving the parameters and the filters outside of Tableau is you can expand the functionality even of parameters. So I don't have one set up here, but imagine you had a parameter and you wanted it to be multi-select, where I could select, say, District 4 and District 2. In Tableau, you can't really do that, but if you blend embedded analytics, which can make a multi-select item, and then parameters in Tableau, you can kind of make something that works pretty well with that. It does require some work on the Tableau side, as well as pairing it with the embedded analytics experience. But it's actually something that we've set up for clients quite a bit before. Just really kind of taking Tableau and pushing the boundaries a little bit more to make it tailored to what you want it to be, to what you need it to be for your users. Let's see. Oh, another really interesting thing on this portal, let's just go look at a different dashboard. We've also implemented this little egg that moves around. That's actually what we call a loading screen. And it's kind of a silly thing, you know, just a little animated GIF on this particular one. But you would be surprised at how much clients like that. It replaces the little circle loader on Tableau. And, you know, if you have quick dashboards, that might not be a big deal. But I have a lot of people that don't, and they want to put up something that looks a little more creative to the end users as that dashboard's compiling. And so my favorite example of this is actually a company. They had this drill down dashboard, and it was data that went down really, really deep, and it was slow. It was 30 seconds slow. And they actually had a lot of users complaining, as you can imagine, about the slowness of this dashboard, the speed. And it's funny, they took the loading animation from Tableau, and with embedded analytics, they replaced it with a loading screen. And in their case, it was a retail company, ironically, and they took pictures of their latest products. They had marketing imagery for it, so it was pretty easy to get a hold of that. And they put those in, and then they put underneath it loading now. And instantly, the complaints about the dashboard being slow dropped, because they kind of played a magic trick, right? Like, look at the pretty object while this dashboard loads in the background. They distracted the users and kind of got their mind off the fact that the dashboard was still loading. Let's see here. Another interesting thing that I love to show off is this showcase site. We'll switch over to it. Showcase site is for our really, really creative solutions, if you will. I love just putting things here because if it's off the wall and just a really unique solution, this is where it goes. Just right at the beginning here, this is a very visual site, kind of a marketing-based landing page versus any dashboards. So you could imagine maybe this is like the landing screen for your reporting experience, especially if maybe you have outside clients. But regardless of why you would need this, your users can come in and they can say, oh, I want to look at some dashboards. Click down, and then we have this, this area with dashboards. From here, we can drill into particular dashboards, or we can search across the top. Just a really interesting way to kind of pull those up. But one thing you might notice about these dashboards, and this is why I really like this experience, is we have a Tableau dashboard here and a Tableau dashboard here. But look at this guy. This is not Tableau. And I would venture to go out on a limb and say that most of you have things that aren't Tableau in your organization. Obviously, we want to move everything to Tableau as fast as we can to make things easier, to consolidate things. But at the end of the day, there's always some kind of legacy system sitting out there, whether it's Looker or whatever, you know. Even those PowerPoint files, there's always going to be something like that. And with embedded analytics, you can really make a one-stop shop. It can have your Tableau reports, it can have your other reports, it can have links out to pages or systems, all kind of in one place. In fact, you can even take Tableau and combine it with something else, which is really fun. And that's why I wanted to pull up this demo. This is our federal spending dashboard here. And this is Tableau on the right-hand side, just a small Tableau dashboard, and then D3 on the left-hand side. You can do something similar to this with extensions as well. But using embedded analytics, we've added a chart on the left-hand side that really you can't do very easily in Tableau. And we can drill in and click on different items in it. And as we do, it's updating the Tableau chart on the right. It's basically using a filter action in Tableau's JavaScript API and triggering an update over there. And actually, you could do vice versa as well, because D3 has similar APIs there. But as you can see, the cool thing about this is we're really expanding that Tableau functionality. We're making a one-stop reporting platform, and we are just really making this consolidated experience for our end users. You could even link off to files, or maybe you need to link off to a SharePoint site or a Wikipedia or something like that, or even just put in some free-form pages like this Contact Us one. Regardless of what that happens to be, really, you have a lot of flexibility with it. One other thing real quick before we leave this site is this write back demo. This is one of my favorites. We saw the inline commenting, and that's one way that you can kind of write back to Tableau, if you will, and update the data that's in there. This is a different way. And so here we have a Tableau chart at the top, and then along the bottoms, a web page. And the web page just has a little form down here. And so we can go in and we can update our forecast numbers. Let's see, it looks like we're probably closer to 55,000. So maybe that's where we want to be. We're actually, I looked at it wrong, 43,000. I'll hit enter. And when I do, it goes out to a database, it saves the numbers, some website kind of magic happening there, refreshes the chart in Tableau. And now we have those new numbers in here. And you can imagine this being something that your analyst would do to kind of forecast maybe next year's sales, or to kind of play with the numbers and get the data how they want it to be before they submit their targets or their goals. And as we save these are actually saved to a database. And so I can refresh this page and they'll be repopulated again, just like we entered them just a second ago. And they're also in that Tableau chart. So just a really interesting way to kind of interact with Tableau. I said that was the last one, but let's do just one more here, because I saw it right before we hit this. And another fun one is Tableau story points and pairing them with a website. We have this us versus them demo. This is pretty old at this point, but it was talking about political ideology, and just a story point dashboard former Zen master Robert Rouse built out. And we paired that with this description on the left-hand side. And as I scroll through this description and go to a new page, it actually switches the story that we're on in Tableau. Tableau's JavaScript APIs have some really interesting ways to tie in to stories. And I can make this, we call it a scrolly telling, but this story that you can scroll through and look at the chart that's relevant as you're doing so. So a really cool way to kind of expand Tableau again. Just switching back over here to our PowerPoint. So really there's a lot of different ways to achieve this. The guy that was on earlier mentioned the Python API. That's going to be something to kind of interact with Tableau programmatically. And that's actually something that you could use to build out embedded analytics from a starting point as well. If you're a Python developer, maybe that's a great place to start. They have tie-ins to Tableau's REST API in particular. And that's going to tell you things about permissions, which users can see which dashboards, or pull images of the dashboards, or see which groups a user is in. So a lot of interesting things as far as data structure and users that you can do with that. A lot of what you do in embedded analytics is going to be the JavaScript API though. And Tableau has really great documentation on both of these. The JavaScript API, if you've done web development, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, it's pretty easy to get started. And Tableau actually does have a couple of boiler custom templates that you can use to kind of use as a base starting point. And so a couple of really great resources there. Tableau does an excellent job of documenting these APIs and kind of helping people get started. At the end of the day, it does require web development knowledge though, which can be a problem, or even, it does require a lot of time as well. And so that's where InterWorks comes in. And there's probably other solutions out there. What I've shown today is actually Curator, which uses Tableau's embedded analytics functionality. And we've really built a product around it so that you can get up and running in as little as 2 weeks, actually. It's just really quick spin up for these, because we have a software that's based around this embedded analytics, and everything that you saw today you could do without ever touching code. And so maybe something like that fits your model as well. But regardless of what it is, embedded analytics is definitely something that you guys should adopt in your organization and move toward, because it helps with your Tableau adoption, which at the end of the day is really what everybody needs more of. I don't know anybody that I've talked to that says I have too many users of my dashboards. It really just kind of helps solidify what you're doing and make it really important to the organization. If you guys do have any more questions or you need some more information, here's my contact information, derrick.austin@interworks.com. Some links to the APIs as well as our stuff. We have a really great blog that walks through some of these things that we've done. That showcase site with the curator demos is a really great resource for ideas as well. And so feel free to reach out if you do have any questions. And I think at this point, right, Steve, we open it up for questions?
We do.
All right.
We have time for one or two. You said that this curator is a tool, right? You're saying you
Yeah.
I thought that right at the very end. I was trying to also try to keep up with the questions, but you said that's an actual tool, like a software as a service almost, to help folks with that.
Yeah. So it is a software that Interworks has basically put together and packaged for embedded analytics. And so we can help you guys get up and running with embedded analytics really quickly with Curator. However, there are a lot of approaches to it. If you wanted to custom code it from the APIs, that's absolutely available and pretty easy to do as well.
Okay. And I think you answered the question in terms of, where'd it go? Do folks need, in terms of other tools and integrating non-Tableau content? And then there was a question, do folks need whatever you're tying together, do those folks need the appropriate license? Like if you pulled together Tableau and tool X, Y, and Z, they need to be fully licensed up that sits kind of underneath all that?
Yep. Yeah, that's a really, really good call out and a question I get a lot. You do need the Tableau licenses under the hood. That's very important. Otherwise, your users will get an error screen from Tableau. And Tableau actually double checks the permissions as well. So they do a really good job of making sure you don't mess it up. So if you put a dashboard in a web page, but the user can't see the underlying dashboard, they still can't see the underlying dashboard. They'll just get an error from Tableau. Okay. Yeah.
We have time, and there's a couple in there. I'll do my best to curate them. And if you have them and you want to put them in, I'll get some of them out of the chat. And if we'll take one more off Q&A, and we'll transition it over to our dynamic duo from Signet. But if we have time at the end, we can always just open it up for general questions for any of the presenters. And can one of these API calls launch a template workbook for creators based on a visual they like to a staged area?
Kind of. I would say Tableau doesn't have great APIs to web edit, but you can link off to web edit. You can create workbooks through an API, through their REST API. And so what I would do is I would pair the REST API to copy that template workbook into a new area for that user, and then give them web edit access to it, which you can set those permissions with the REST API, and then you could link them to it with just like a URL link.
Okay. Well, thank you. That was fantastic. I know I was frantically sending some messages to one of my colleagues that's on this, because this is a much better articulated idea that we've been describing, and you just brought it all into fruition. So it's it's called serendipity. So serendipity
that's funny.
At our door. So I greatly appreciate the content. What I would ask for folks that are out there, keep loading up any questions you have in the Q&A. We'll either have time at the end, or we can send those out to you, Derrick, as a follow-up. Sound good?
Perfect. Yeah, this sounds great. Thanks, guys. I'll stop sharing and I'll toss it over.
All right. We're going to throw it over quickly to Gary and Ian. Maybe you've seen their story highlighted on the Tableau front pages, but we're super excited. It was an excellent recommendation by Derrick Shreve, who said, "Hey, there's this. You need to get these folks up on the stage, up on the virtual stage here at the Columbus Tug, because they have an excellent story that would no doubt interest your user community." So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you two, Gary and Ian. Please take it away.
All right, thank you, Steve. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for welcoming us here to present. We have the Path to Brilliance Building an Analytical Center of Excellence at Signet Jewelers, and it's really a story of how we're sharing our strategy, but it's also just telling our story of changing hearts and minds. It's not just software installation that we're talking about here, Alteryx and Tableau, but it's changing hearts and minds within the organization. I'm Gary Gruccio, Director of Enterprise and Market Analytics at Signet, which is K Jewelers, Jared, the Gallery of Jewelry, Zales, Piercing Pagoda, and James Allen here in the United States. What you can take away from my experience is that I'm a geographer who learned to do analytics work. I've been at it for almost, well, actually over 20 years. I love Alteryx and Tableau, especially the combination between the two software packages. And then the payoff for me now really is bringing others along the analytics journey.
And then Ian Reed, been with Signet for 5, going on 6 years under Gary this entire time. And as we go through this today, of course, we're talking about our organizational change and how we brought these tools into Signet and started to expand them. But I also want you guys to think about this in terms of your own career development. So a lot of what happened with our story also translated to my personal development. I've had 5 roles within those 6 years, most recently promoted to the Director of Digital Analytics. And I can say in my heart of hearts, this would not have happened if it wasn't for this path that Gary helped bring me on.
All right, thank you for that, Ian. Our agenda really is to talk a little bit about the Path to Brilliance, like what it is, what's the Signet transformation plan, and we're basically at the end of that. So this fit really well into that. Overcoming some of the challenges that we had, some of the conflict that an integration like this would have created naturally. How do you keep the momentum with your user base, especially as a little bit of a challenge now with COVID-19 and some of the shutdowns that we've had. Some of the big wins, some of the really cool things that we're doing, we'll be able to share some of those as well. And then some key takeaways. Again, as Ian said, it's really our story, but we're hoping that we inspire people that they can work within their organizations to bring change as well. This is something that really started small within a department and grew to a company-wide movement. So what do we mean by Path to Brilliance? Well, the official strategy is that Signet has 3 strategic planks: a customer first, omni-channel, and a culture of agility and efficiency. And what you can see here is that there are some sub-bullets that align really well with nimble software. We chose Alteryx and Tableau. The idea that you can get more or deeper consumer understanding, to empower your users to be more innovative, to have more leadership at every level, unleashing the full power or potential of people, faster and data-driven decisions. Once you get out of the Excel mindset or access databases and Excel and that kind of thing more into an Alteryx and Tableau universe, you can really make some speed and efficiencies happen. And so we thought that the deployment of the software would really be a way to align with the strategic planks of our vision as a company. As we've kind of mentioned or alluded to, we started small within a department. The alignment of our department was underneath the Chief Transformation Officer, but real estate reported up through her. And we as a real estate team were building all of these data efficiencies, workflows that would take 3-day jobs down to 5 minutes, those kind of things. And the dashboards that we were presenting were really getting some recognition. And as you have a representative on the C-suite, she's eventually able to influence the organization to say that, look, the real estate team really has it together in terms of their data management and their data visualization skills. And how do you then make that happen for the rest of the company or take it company-wide?
And just Gary, if you want to go back a second, I do want to jump in on that. This slide's so important because what happened was this grew out of probably the least likely place of the organization is real estate. I hear a lot of other deployments that where they start is really top down. And what this story is really showcasing is that you can do it anywhere you sit in your organization. I mean, this really honestly started with one person. He said, hey guys, I have an idea, who's on board? And it really took off from there. So I know it kind of glossed over that, but the fact that it comes from real estate, I think is really important part of this story, because it shows cases, again, it's not a top-down approach. It really can originate from anywhere.
Yeah, and that's part of inspiring people to, wherever you sit within the organization, that you can bring change. Kind of like why us? I've been working with Alteryx for a long time. 2009 was when I first picked it up. You can see it looks, for any users, it looks a little bit different than it used to. But using it for a long time, so we had the internal expertise. And recognizing the community as an Alteryx ace. So it was just another way to say that there's some credibility here, that we can grow this out of real estate and make it happen company-wide. And then in Tableau, we've been using it for, well, now almost 6 years. So there was some legitimacy. It's not like we were saying, let's try this and let's try to make it happen within the whole company. We'd actually demonstrated that we were able to have proficiency in it and make efficiencies happen that then could be launched company-wide based on our historical performance as a department. And so what we typically run into then when you start to want to launch a new software is the idea of who's going to manage it, who's going to control it. And you typically have this sort of push-pull or this tug of war between the IT department and the departments at large, or the departments in the business, where IT really wants more control, consistency, making sure that you can reuse data sets, making sure that the data sets all tie out, consensus, that kind of thing. And the business units want freedom, autonomy, speed, the kind of things that, I want to be able to react at the speed of business, not wait for things to be done. And so how could we sort of bridge this gap? And the thought was that we could implement a model where there was somebody sitting between IT, the traditional IT department, and the business units, and that would be us, that we sort of would fill that role to link and maybe help the departments give up a little bit of their freedom, maybe have more of a centralized approach to their data. You wouldn't believe the number of data silos or different solutions that each department would implement on their own, and sort of create these shadow IT departments. And then maybe for IT to give up a little bit of the control that they have, like in the tools that were being used to access the data. So officially how it works is we kind of fit between the IT department and the departmental teams, representing the business units to the IT department, representing the IT department to the business units. By working to form this data governance committee, where we would get together once a month to discuss data issues that the departments had, and then also facilitating the idea of analytics or the centralized approach to the departments by creating a community of analysts that got together so that you might actually know the people that you're working with in other departments instead of just knowing that they're out there. As a more formal approach to data governance, we would have monthly meetings. We would work with data stewards to make sure that the data that was going into the warehouse was vetted and understood in terms of definitions of the data. We also meet once a month to discuss and vote on priorities. Our intent is to eventually have a data dictionary or data warehouse dictionary in Alteryx Connect, so that our users can access like one centralized place where users are contributing data definitions and making sure that people have an understanding of what sales is, because operations might not want to include merchandise and repair and warranty all in the same definition of sales. They may want it broken out or to omit some of the different categories of sales. And then the analytics community of excellence is something we put together to get people in, talking to one another. In the same room. We would have like an Alteryx day, a Tableau day. I serve as the data champion for Alteryx. Ian internally as the data visualization champion within Tableau. And then we had ambassadors from different departments. So kind of the way we structured it is the ambassadors would be sort of credible witnesses to the departments themselves that, yes, this is a good thing. Yes, I'm able to do it. Here's some great things that I've done. Because what you find is that sometimes it takes a person or two within a department to actually demonstrate the proficiency before others in the department are willing to pick it up and use it and begin to implement and change some of their older procedures.
And going back to that, Gary, I do want to touch on that as well, the conference or mini conference. So this Signet Day is something I really encourage you guys to try at your organization. So it's really funny how this kind of whole thing evolved. So for those that have gone to the Tableau conference, it's such a great experience. You learn so much about individuals, use cases, culture, etc. And we wanted to bring that inside the organization since not everyone gets a chance to go to those. So we created this, what we called Signet Data Days, which is almost like a mini conference. So we got speakers from Alteryx, we got speakers for Tableau, and we broke it up into 30-minute to an hour classes. And people could decide, did they want to go to the Alteryx course? Did they want to go to the Tableau course? And kind of bounced around. But more than that, it fostered communication. I'm sure a lot of you guys have the same problem at your organization, that analysts by nature are introverts. Any chance we can get people to come in a room and talk to each other is always a good opportunity. And what's really funny about this is when we brought this up to our executives, they kind of said, yeah, sure, you guys can go ahead and do that. And they expected there to be 8, maybe 10 people that show up. So when we were able to get this picture of everyone that was in the room, I think it really opened their eyes to say, oh my gosh, this culture and this community is really growing. So this was a really cool idea I kind of want to bring up with a group of these quote unquote mini conferences.
Mm-hmm. The challenge now is how do you make it happen virtually, which we're attempting. But exactly, we try to get people together quarterly. We have an active Teams site where we allow people to post any kind of questions that they have to the community at large. So it's one good use of Microsoft Teams, besides having actual meetings, is that you can create these virtual workspaces. I use it to present or promote user groups on here as well. But what we found is that majority of these questions we can answer internally, even technical issues, almost like the first line of defense in a technical question. You know, we don't have to go to Alteryx or Tableau to answer our questions. We try to answer them for the most part internally, and others stepping up to answer the questions, not just Ian and myself to answer the questions. We tried lab hours, not all that successful. You tend to get people really when they have a problem rather than a certain time of the week. And then we foster and we make sure that we recognize those that get certified in Alteryx, in Tableau. We're also looking at skill belts and things like that to try to get people engaged in that. And the e-learning portal is also something that we've pushed out to the group. But like we talked about, it's not just about bringing the software in and saying like, here it is, use it, become part of this community. It's like, how do you work with the individual mindsets that you have to deal with? Some of it is working with the IT department that's going to have to support some of the internal data needs, the infrastructure. How do you work with the analytical community and really convince them that this is a good thing, and that the process that they've worked on for like 10 to 15 years that they're really attached to, that maybe it's okay to give that up, that you might find better use for your time if you can automate and create some great visualizations. And then finally, the funding aspect of it. How do you make executives aware of all of the great things that you can do with the software and make them want to pay for it, basically. So we had different messaging for each of the groups. Ian's going to go a little bit more into some of that, and then I'll come back and tell you how that experience went when we attempted it, and what do we actually do.
Yeah, so I put this slide in here. I thought it was a really good chance to talk about this. I've been to a lot of presentations, and a lot of people talk about, hey, how do we get these tools inside your organization? And then some of them talk about, hey, here's our COE, and this is best in class. But what I've missed from those is talking about that. So there's a lot that goes into when you first get a tool in your organization to actually building out that PO or the COE. And that's what I wanted to highlight now. So once we had these tools inside of real estate, we were able to successfully convince IT to say, okay, guys, we want to do a POC. Let's see what the impact is going to be to the organization. They bought in, they said, sure, go ahead. And Gary's going to touch on that. But once we did that, I metaphorically thought we were going to have a line out our department of giving away licenses. So our POC was structured such that we had a limited amount of licenses. So I thought I was going to be like, Oprah, you get a license, you get a license, you get a license. And sure, we had some people trickle in, but more often than not, we didn't get as many as I thought. And it really made me go back to the drawing board and said, well, why aren't we getting more people to convert to Alteryx, convert to Tableau? And that's where I came up with this slide that said we really had to tailor our message to each department. and make it relevant to them. So I broke it down in these three groups: the analyst, executive, and IT. From an analyst, that was the easiest because, of course, I was an analyst at the time. So I said, why did I want to convert to that? And for me, it broke it down into three big pillars. The first was time. What I did every single day is I came in, I downloaded my data, I transformed it into Excel, I put it into a report, and that was my week. And then the next week started, and I would do the same thing all over again. And it made me, over time, not feel a lot of gratitude towards my job. I felt like I was doing the same thing over and over again. It was very monotonous. And that wasn't what I was hired to do. I wanted to be an analyst. I wanted to be a problem solver. And that's what these tools allowed us to do. So as Gary mentioned, we automated all of our processes. I remember the first one that I did, I took a 3-hour process down to 5 minutes. And then said, wow, I got all this extra time now. What can I do? And that's when I started doing what I consider true analytical work and becoming a problem solver. And then even more than that, what we did to tailor this to the analyst was to talk about it in terms of their own career progression. At the end of the day, that's what we all want to do, is we all want to get recognized, get promoted, and make more money. And this is that avenue to do that. We put our money where our mouth is. So of the individuals that did get certified, almost all of them have been, I would say 90 to 95% have been promoted within the year that they got their certification. And yes, that speaks about the certification, but it also speaks about how you translate this to your everyday job, and how easy that is. In terms of executives, that was a little bit more challenging because, of course, I wasn't an executive. But I put myself in their shoes and I said, what is their job? Their job is to help change a course of action, help drive strategic decisions. And at the end of the day, all that is storytelling in its most basic form. How do you create a compelling story? And once you show them the visualizations and explain the principles of visualization, a light bulb goes off. If you hand somebody the old adage of a crosstab and say, hey, can you follow along and tell me what pops out at you, versus if you give them a visualization, it's night and day different. And when you are able to articulate that to executives and then see the proof in the pudding when they go into meetings armed with the visualization and how much smoother that goes, that's when you really start to get their buy-in. And even more than that, let's be honest, it's cool. So if you have somebody that comes in with an interactive dashboard versus somebody that comes in before you with just a crosstab spreadsheet, you are a little bit more confident, more excited, and it's a more fun meeting. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, the biggest thing is cost savings. I'm going to go into that a little bit more in a minute. But we had one experience in particular that was extremely eye-opening. We had one department that was third-partying their visualizations and reporting out to another company. And it came the night before the big presentation, and they couldn't get in contact with them because it was after hours. So they were very frustrated. They didn't get what they wanted to communicate it across in the presentation. And I came to the table and said, guys, well, let's just take a look at this. It ended up actually being Tableau, and we rebuilt the entire presentation in 6 hours. And you should have seen the look on their faces to say, oh my gosh, I had no idea you guys could do this in-house. And it really said, why are we spending money on third parties to do these kind of report building exercises when we can do it in-house? So that was really eye-opening for them. And then lastly, in terms of IT, that was an easy one. There's three big pillars. The first is consolidation of reporting. At our organization, prior to having Tableau, it was really just Excel reports flying around in emails. No one knew which was the most current version. No one knew if the data was up to date, and none of the reporting matched. So by putting it all into one system, you have now data governance. You can see who's looking at what, when they're looking at it, when it's updated, and that made for a really happy IT. And then lastly, it's helping promote what we call this ecosystem of data. So I'm sure this is not unique to Signet, but all of our data was very siloed. It was hard to get marketing to communicate to real estate to communicate to store operations. And once we started having this ability to say, hey guys, here's all this data that we have, it really opened them up to say, I didn't know we had that data. I didn't know it was available. It was in a curated format, et cetera. So you started having more cross collaboration because everything was in a centralized environment. Do it go to, oh, there we go. So that brought up the next question. This is the one that everyone has a hard time answering. And to be honest, we did too. It's that dreaded question of the ROI. I don't think there's a magic answer of how do you overcome that question. But what we found is you just start tracking and tracking and tracking, and eventually something's going to bubble up that's going to be that big ticket winning item. So we talked to our community and said, hey guys, you want to keep these tools? We gotta prove it. And more often than not, it came from a project that we least expected it. So for us, it came in the form of a maintenance dashboard for our store. So you would think that if a showcase broke, if carpet ripped in a store, it'd be a no-brainer to say, yep, we're going to go ahead and fix that. But that's not actually the case. All this data about the store, when it was closing, if it was closing, if we're remodeling, if we're going to move to another store, all these kinds of things was in disparate data sources all throughout the organization. So what we did, and I'll show the dashboard at the end, but we brought it all into one location, which helped them make their decisions better. So what one analyst did is they tracked their decision in the old way, and then they would pull up the dashboard and say, okay, now that I have this dashboard, what decision would I make? And it ended up being to the tune of several $100,000 a year that they end up saving by having all this data in one location. The other big roadblock that we run into is I'm doing just fine with my current reporting. I don't need your fancy tools. Well, I would say two things to that. The first, if they're not interested, don't spend your time with them. Find the people that are interested and really leverage their time the most. And then there was another piece of information that we got from an executive at Alteryx that said, here's an idea, just throwing this out, that worked at our organization. He said, for those detractors, just start putting people that are using these tools around them. So if they're surrounded by people talking about Tableau, talking about Alteryx, they can't help but start to hear those, and they're going to start to convert faster just from hearing other people being successful around them. And lastly, it's a no-brainer, but use leadership to your advantage. Every time you go into meetings in Alteryx or Tableau was how you arrived at the outcome, just mention that. The repetition will start to sink in, and over time they're going to say, yeah, Alteryx and Tableau, no-brainer, we need to fund that. So continue to use leadership to your advantage.
So talking a little bit about what actually happened, the first thing that Ian mentioned was that we did go into a proof of concept with our IT team. We had an executive sponsor for this, and it's really the only way that we got it done. We actually had somebody on the C-suite pushing it. And, you know, truthfully, I'll say that we created a lot of conflict. And that may be something that, you know, you can't go into not knowing that there may be, you know, some issues. We put something on IT that was not on the roadmap. It wasn't discussed and vetted and budgeted and all these kind of things. And so, you know, there were a lot of hoops that we had to jump through to get it to happen. There were forms that we needed to fill out that normally IT would have done for us, but, you know, it was worth filling them out. We were able to then define the success criteria. So by the time it came time to evaluate it at the end, you know, we had really defined it well enough that it showed the IT team that this was something that really was different than what they were offering up. And so we met the success criteria for go live, but there are better ways, right, than creating conflict and going that you know, that route of getting an executive to say you will do this. And so we really moved or morphed more to a partnership. We've worked with IT hand in hand. We've really taken away some of, or alleviated some of their issues, which was they just didn't have the expertise in the tools, to working with third-party vendors. And it's always important to take advantage of third-party vendors where applicable or where needed, where you may not have the internal resources to stand up and put together like an Alteryx server or to work with a Tableau online deployment and make sure you have single sign-on authentication in place, those kind of things. So it's eventually morphed into a partnership, but you know, the reality is that you may find that there is some conflict with the IT team, and the best way to work is in partnership and hopefully get past that initial conflict, which, you know, we'll fully admit that we did have. You know, if you are opposed, but you really want to make sure this happens, you know, be glad to jump through any kind of hoops. It would be good to shop around within IT to find someone who's willing to support it from the inside. This was, you know, having an advocate would be so important within IT, and then leveraging outside resources if needed. To the analytical community, how did we win their hearts and minds? This is a big one that we talked about before. You're going to save time using these tools. You know, who wants to look like this at the end of the day, every single day, like Ian mentioned, right? You want to be able to have time to get things done before you need to turn them in, so you have a chance to review them, make sure the data is accurate. Everyone's felt like this at some point or another, but by using these tools, you can alleviate some of that and feel good about the work and about having enough time to get it done. Implicit in all of this is that you've got data sources everywhere. a tool like Alteryx helps you bring it all together into one place. You can blend the data sets that you normally would work with Excel, and you can also enrich the data with geographic information and demographic information, so that it's much easier to create a blended data set. It helps you avoid errors when you create a workflow that's automated, that you vetted and made sure that it's correct. It's really much like a plug and play. You can come in every morning and know that the data is run and not worry about a VLOOKUP error that you have in your spreadsheet or any other manual processes that can potentially derail you or throw you off. Staying relevant in your career is something that you also might want to be mindful of. Making sure that you are promotable in the future, that you have these kind of tools. When as they become more and more mainstream, there's like a joke that I often ask people: how many data scientists do I have here in the room? Usually, there's nobody in the room, or a few hands go up, and then I ask, "Do you want to be replaced by a data scientist?" And no one wants to be replaced by a data scientist, right? If they have the analytical capability, they can potentially learn to use these tools and stay relevant using tools that maybe help you if you don't have the coding background like R and Python. We worked with them to train them. This is a picture of an internal training that we did with Lee Feinberg at DecisionViz. So some of the trainings we do on site, some of it we do by webinar training. We try to leverage external resources to assist when possible, because we just don't have the capacity to build a training team within our company. But then working with the people, sometimes you want to work with somebody to build it for them if they just really don't have the vision. Maybe you can show them. The best is that you build it with them. So you actually sit down with somebody and scope out a business problem and then work with them to build their solution out. And then there are some that really want to build things for themselves. So it's really 3 different ways that you can work with your user base. And then finally pitching the idea that you're going to love your job again. You can spend more time with your family. They'll make your life better, not just your work better. Does it work? Not for everyone. Some people get it right away. Some people really love the old way of doing things. Some people may even feel that they're too advanced for this, that they've gone beyond needing tools that would enable them. But sometimes they come later and say like, yeah, I get that I can do this in Python or R, but it's just so much easier to use tools like Tableau and Alteryx. But you're limited in your time and your resources, so you really want to focus on people who want to learn. As far as management and executives, for the executive teams, you really want to focus on the ROI and the financial wins. For the management, you really want to focus on things like you're going to get your data and reporting faster. You're going to allow your team members to develop it, maybe a job satisfaction issue as well, and that you can break away from the "we've always done it that way" mindset. Sometimes working, with the executives or the middle management is a little bit harder, because people are still used to getting the same old report. Maybe they don't want to give somebody time to develop a new way of doing things, and so we're still even ourselves exploring change management options where we can bring in some maybe training or data literacy to the mid-level or higher level executives.
So this comes to the question, has it paid off? I love this slide, half joking, because when I first put this up after I showed it to someone, they go, "This is a horrible visualization," and I'll explain why in a minute, but it always makes me laugh. So the question is, has it paid off? I would say overall, yes, absolutely it has. The way we got this funded after the POC, unfortunately, was with a chargeback model, which means that, yes, as an organization, we bought, call it 100 licenses of each, but then if a department wants to use it, they would have to pay for those, and then we would allocate it to them. So what ended up happening was departments that had a lot of money and a lot of funding, the big departments, they had licenses and they bought them, but they never used them. And then the departments that actually needed the licenses but were smaller, they didn't have the funds to get them. So in hindsight, chargeback model probably wasn't the best approach, but it did get us to the promised land, if you will. So once we removed that chargeback model, Gary and I now got the luxury of saying who gets the licenses. And what we did is we used a use it or lose it policy. because we didn't have enough licenses for everybody. So we said, hey, if you have a license, you have to use it. Otherwise, we're going to reallocate that to someone else in the organization. So you can see by the visualization, yes, we saw a steady increase in views. It was largely centralized to just a few different departments at the beginning, but I attribute that mostly to the chargeback model. But the reason I laugh about this slide, and I think probably the big takeaway, is when I showed this to someone, they said, you using views of a dashboard as your barometer for success is kind of a misleading story, because he said, imagine a situation where you make this phenomenal dashboard and you give it to a chief officer and he looks at the sales and he says, awesome, I'm within my threshold. The next day he looks at it, he goes, again, I'm within my threshold. Well, by the third, fourth, or fifth day, he's going to stop looking at the dashboard because if he's always within the threshold. So he said, just because you're not getting views from that individual doesn't mean it was a bad dashboard. It's just at that point in time, there was nothing in that dashboard to alert him to look at it. So once he said that, the light bulb went off, which I know I'm late to the game and many in this room probably are already using it, but use alerts. They'll get people to start looking at their dashboard, obviously, when there's a story that's worth looking at it. But just keep that in mind that maybe total views on a dashboard is not the right barometer. So once we went full enterprise on these, I'm gonna go back one. There we go. How do we sustain, one more forward, sorry. So I saw a question just come up, but I'll address it. What was our use it or lose it time frame for reallocating licenses? So we started with 30 days, and we figured that was a good enough window that, hey, if you're looking at it once a month or you're going in there and publishing a dashboard once a month, that's good enough for us. The reason we chose that, though, is mostly because we had the benefit of seeing how many people are requesting licenses and what is that lead time it's going to take to give them. So we chose 30. As we bought more licenses, we eased up on that a little bit, but as it stands now, it's 30 to 45. But we don't make it public. It's really just a way to try and gamify people to continue to use their license. Otherwise, the threat of potentially losing it. So going back to this slide of strategies for gaining sustaining support, I'll go through those super quickly. Tableau Skill Belt, if you guys haven't had a chance to look at that, highly encourage you to go look at that on YouTube. It's a way to internalize the Tableau certification process. So it's free and it gives users a good pathway to learn the tool. We've already talked about focusing on people who show interest, internal events. One that you guys, I recommend using if you haven't already is a hackathon. So what we envision doing for this is we bring in all different analysts, whether you use the tool or not, you can still participate. And you come to the table with a question that the organization hasn't potentially answered yet, and said, hey, we're going to give you guys 4 hours, split into groups, use Alteryx, use Tableau, use R, use Python, whatever you guys want to answer the question. We bring in guest judges, which are executives. So that way, people get practice speaking to executives, people get the spotlight, and then the executives get to see what kind of tools we're using. And oh, by the way, at the end of the day, you answer a question for the organization. The rest of those, I think we've touched on a lot. Really key, important pieces, the visualization principles, which I'm sure everyone being in the Tableau user group can relate to. I see someone say that we do hackathons at Honda a lot. That is fantastic. They are a game changer. Lastly, developing a culture of data. This is probably the most cliche thing you'll hear all day, but I truly believe it. So when you bring in tools like Alteryx and you bring in tools like Tableau, you're not just bringing in a tool, you're bringing a culture. And if you really think about it as a tool, I think you're completely missing the boat. So what we try to do to implement that culture on the organization is we're not teaching them Tableau. We're not teaching you how to use this tool. What I want to teach you is how to teach yourself to learn. So I don't go to them and say, hey, you're having trouble doing this with this dashboard. Let me show you how to do it. I'll set up this parameter. I'll set up this function. Instead, I work with them and say, hey, let's go to Google. Let's go to the community. Let's figure out how you would troubleshoot it on your own. That way, they're not relying on us, and I'm teaching them to fish. These are just a couple quotes I love to highlight through this culture that we're starting to build. These are actually coming from our CEO. And I was super excited to hear her say this, but she said, no longer should the person in the room with the most stripes on their shoulder dictate the conversation. What she was alluding to in this and saying, hey, we want our analysts to have a seat at the table. Just because they're not SVPs or VPs, I want them to dictate the conversation because they know the data the best. And then from that, she went on to say, we need to create a career path for our analysts. So I think once you start to ingrain this culture throughout the organization and you start to hear it at the top level, which is the executive, that's when the community immediately latches on and say, hey, you're not just speaking words, this is actually coming to fruition, and you're seeing it through the speech of our executives.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to kind of be up against time, so I'll just quickly go through this to get to the end, and so we have some time for questions. But does it pay off? Well, actually, first, the takeaways are this is a real example of like a bottoms-up grassroots movement that we put in place, and we intended to succeed, and we actually did make a difference. We made a difference. You can do the same. Know that change can be difficult. Sometimes you might create conflict, but sometimes you need to be persistent to make that change happen. And also then, again, be willing to look outside of your organization for third-party expertise if it just doesn't, it's not your thing to, as we just saw with InterWorks, the web integration would be something that would be probably outside of your realm, Ian, outside of my realm. But going to the bottom line, how has it worked out? And you can infer that there's a linkage between what we've done and company performance. But if you just take a look at our quarterly results, second quarter, third quarter, and holiday, we've been able to react very nimbly to the COVID-19 situation, the store shutdowns, and all the different things that we've had to do to get back up and operating as a business. Because we have these tools, we can deliver answers very, very quickly that have, we would argue translated into at least some of the strong performance that we've seen, because we've made some very good strategic decisions. So I'll go ahead and close out, unless Ian, do you have anything else to add?
Nope, that's good.
All right. Ready for some questions?
Sure.
All right, let's see what we have on the...
So we have a few on the Q&A.
Yeah, here's one. How do you encourage analysts to ask for help on MS Teams instead of directly coming to you? So I think it's that idea of continuing to empower that analyst community.
Yeah. So I can start with this, and I'll turn it over to you, Gary. So this is probably a silly answer to you, but once you start showcasing your personality and you understand that you have a working relationship, I would come to them joking and say, oh, let me Google that for you, or something like that, to be like, all right, did you put any effort into doing this? The second thing that we do is, that is a tough question, and that is something that culturally is hard to shift people's patterns. But we started saying, hey, if you want me to work with me, if you want to work with me and we help you build out dashboards in this analytical suite, you have to put in the effort first. So I would go to them and say, hey, I need you to show me that you've watched these 5, 10, 15 videos. For Alteryx, you have to show me that you've been core certified before we can work with you. And a lot of times these conversations end up having to be with their leadership, because a lot of times they'll say, oh, well, I don't have time because I'm so busy doing these reports day in and day out. So what we would do is we would proactively go to their leadership and say, hey, if you want them to go turn the page, if you will, and start really leveraging these tools, they have to go slow to go fast. And in order to do that, you have to free up time. Once you articulate that to their leadership, they go, yep, that makes sense. So I don't know if that directly answered your question, but we do make sure that people are not just leaning on us, but instead are actually trying to learn their tool on their own. And we do several steps to make sure that they are.
Yeah, I think another thing is just the fact that people do get answers sort of creates more of a snowball effect. That somebody posts something and 3 people answer it, the next person might feel more confident in posting something there. So it proved itself out as people asked questions, they got answers. It really helped. But there are people that know our direct number too.
Do you all, little follow-up, this is coming directly from me, not the question that was posted. Do you all have targets in terms of increasing the amount of content that's being developed by folks, quote unquote, out in the business, with the idea of maybe decreasing some of that demand on your team through time?
We don't have a quota per se. It's a great idea. I'm not sure how in our organization we would implement something like that, but at the moment we don't. Gary, can you think of any situations where we do something like that? I'm kind of drawing a blank.
No, what I found was just was pleasantly surprised that others were stepping up, that it wasn't always falling on you and me to answer the questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is related. I was just thinking about the different, and so someone's asking about the different internal forums you have used to galvanize the community. In addition, so
Yeah.
we saw the internal, would you go, you want hackathon, internal conference, anything else you're doing to help? You know, we were trying to, the woman that from my team that's also on the call right now, we were talking about how do you get that community talking more amongst themselves and where everything doesn't flow either up to you or down from you.
Gary, you want to handle that one, or do you want me to?
Yeah, well, you know, the quarterly events are great, and the problem is now you don't really get much interaction even with a virtual event. Even like this, you know, you can't see the participants, right? And you can't you have participants have like a side conversation or that kind of thing. Up until COVID hit, we even tried or work like with social events, just like, hey, all the analysts that are part of this, we're getting together at a local restaurant after work, and you know, just see who would come there. So each it's really about trying to build relationships and trust.
Yeah, one thing that we did most recently in our community group is we started having departmental spotlights. That was one way to people say, oh, I didn't see how you guys were using the tool. I think when you start to see how, like, let me take a step back. When you see Tableau and you watch their training, it's one thing, but to see how it's actually implemented inside your organization's data is another. So when we had departmental spotlights and people would come to the table and say, here's this data, and we went from this data to this dashboard to this insight, that really started getting people to start asking questions, getting involved, because they're also using that same data, at least in one capacity or another. So those departmental spotlights was a good way to start breaking down those silos.
In terms of data governance, there's how did you determine who the data stewards were and to get them to take ownership of their role within data governance?
So we pretty much went to the power users of each department. I think it was a pretty easy answer to decide who is going to be those data stewards. And to incentivize them for the first year, we gave them a free pass to a conference of their choice. So whether it was Alteryx or whether it was Tableau. So our department funded that. Unfortunately, that obviously went to the wayside with COVID, but it was a way for us to stir up some interest in doing it.
Right. Alexander, you have two questions here. Are you using any actions to source systems, scheduling, service portals, etc., such as linking? And then there was another one that's, what kind of barriers to interoperability have you had?
Gary, you want to take a stab? You want me to take that one?
Well, I think, you know, the source, what we have is a model where the IT department can set up a data connection that can be read by the various tools through a service account. You know, then the question is, you know, who has access to those kind of things? We schedule jobs on the server, and we have a way to integrate the Alteryx server to the Tableau online instance, so that there's a way that we can run a job at 3 a.m. and then have it published to Tableau server at 4 a.m. Beyond that, we're not doing a whole lot of like external polls or that kind of thing, but the efficiency of scheduling. And then what was the second part of the question, that last part?
Oh, I think I just, around interoperability.
Oh, so some of the challenges are that, you know, some of the data resides in business objects, and that there are curated queries within there. We actually had to go to a third-party developer that created a linkage between Alteryx and business objects to pull the data directly, you know, as it mimics being in business objects, but you're in Alteryx.
Yeah, so we actually don't have, probably should have included this in our presentation. Tableau is actually not hooked up to any data sources. And I think we're pretty unique in that, not by design, but more so by the way IT has kind of structured our curation of data. So instead of going directly to a data source, our users have to use Alteryx to pull data or export it from one system. They ETL it and then publish it up. as a individual hyper file for each dashboard. The big reason for that was, as we originated from real estate, we bypassed IT almost entirely through this whole process, because they put their hands up and said, I want nothing to do with this. I don't want to integrate this. So we said, okay, fine, just let us stand it up and we'll figure it out. And that's why we use Alteryx to kind of overcome that barrier of not having Tableau hooked up to any databases. But it does increase performance on the back end. So there's one positive to it.
All right, gentlemen, greatly appreciate your time. Fantastic presentation. And
Right, thank you.
Running very short on time here. Aaron, I'm going to throw it over to you. Breaking news.
Breaking news. So our Tableau e-license for the first participant, or not the first, but one of the participants from our Learning from Our Peers section is going to be Deborah Ann. So round of applause for her. So we will shoot you the details for that Tableau e-license. Be prepared, the rest of the community, to speak next time during our Learn from Your Peers session. We are going to sometimes randomly throw out prizes and gifts for those who are willing to share their stories with the audience. So thank you all for joining our February first of the year kickoff meeting, and we hope to see you at a regular cadence this year. It looks like we have a question maybe from Doug. Doug, do you have a question? Douglas? You could type it in the chat or the Q&A and we'll go ahead and answer that. Maybe not.
I think we're good.
I think we're good. And I think my tornado siren's going off, so.
All right.
All right, with that, I'll end the meeting. Have a
It's
great
the
day.
excitement from Tableau. It's setting off all the alarms that here are going off too. I think it's the excitement, the fantastic presentation, Derrick, Gary, and Ian, and the excitement over the Tableau e-learning license. Thank you all very much. And again, you can find the recording. We'll send it out to everyone that RSVP'd and then put it on our LinkedIn page. If you have any questions, want to chat, you know where to find it.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.